Okay, cool. With time in mind, we'll just start kick off. So welcome and thank you for joining this morning's FortiSandbox webinar. My name is Vinu. If you haven't met me, I'm a pre-sales engineer at Wavelink. I've been with Wavelink for about 2 years now, and I spend more time in putting together solutions for partners, anything Fortinet related. And I also do enablement training, whether it's in person or webinars like this. We're very lucky today to have Daniel Polidori. Daniel's one of Fortinet's consulting systems engineers. Daniel's got a wealth of experience in the industry. He works with products like FortiSandbox, obviously, but also products like FortiSwitch, FortiNDR, Forti EDR, and the likes as well. So today's agenda, we're going to look at a current and evolving landscape that's affecting security operations. We're going to look at the anatomy of the attack via the kill chain. Then we're going to dive into the FortiSandbox and its advanced threat detection capabilities. And then finally, an exciting demos lined up today as well. The last part would be a question and answer area. But at any point, if you do have questions, feel free to leverage the chat section. We'll keep an eye and monitor and respond as seem fit. So let's dive in and look at some challenges today. So if you look at the market trends, evolving threat landscape is making a lot more harder, right? So with AI, criminals launch attacks with very minimal effort. If you look at the attack surface, it's growing. It used to be a clear line between a protected and unprotected network. So that's changed now. With work from anywhere practices, employees are scattered around the globe. Then there's more connected devices with Internet things on the rise and operational technology. There's a lot more devices. So your entry points and exit points and your network parameters are no longer defined as simple as they could be. With cloud, hybrid cloud, public cloud, everything's changing as well. This brings in an increase in attack vectors that becomes a lot harder to protect your environments. Skill shortage, there's an industry-wide skill shortage that makes it really hard to fill roles that's rising in organization. This brings an overburden on security teams in managing threats and security issues they may face on a day-to-day basis. This brings in an increased risk as threats grow to be a lot more sophisticated, puts organizations in a greater risk of getting breached. Last part is complexity. There's too many vendors, too many tools, there's too much information overload. Alerts, events, it needs to be simplified. It needs to be brought into a central console where you got visibility and control. What your prospects are saying about security. So 52% find security operations a lot more difficult. Half of IT and security professionals say managing security operations is tougher than what they saw 2 years ago. 41% said rapidly evolving threat landscape has made it a lot more complex. New attack methods, including AI-driven threats, are on the rise. 39% said continuously changing attack surface. So we talked about the attack surface more in the previous slide. So you can see workers working across the globe. There's a lot more connected devices, or even everything is connected to the internet these days, right? 37% saw increased volume and complexity to alerts as well. Consolidation to reduce risk. So if you look at the data from 2020 to 2022, what struck me is that 20% of organizations did not have a vendor consolidation strategy. However, just in 2 years, it reduced from 20% to 3%. And also in 2020, only 29% of organizations were looking at implementing a strategy. 2 years down the track, this increased by 2.5% to 75%. Primary reasons why they're looking at vendor consolidation, 65% looked at because they want to improve their risk posture. 59% looked at their security capabilities. 42% wanted to adapt a security strategy, a vendor strategy. 36% wanted to look at a flat or reduced security team staffing. Threat landscape is becoming a lot more complex. So long-lived exploits, so older exploits remain a significant threat, highlighting the need for continuous patching and monitoring. Our expanding attack surface, as attack surfaces expand, organizations must continuously update their defenses to address new vulnerabilities such as zero-day and unknown threats. The rise in targeted attacks are becoming more efficient, underscoring the need for quicker threat detection and response. Advanced persistent threat attackers, APTs remain the persistent and evolving threat requiring ongoing vigilance and advanced security measures. Industrial ransomware, OT environments are increasingly targeted by ransomware, emphasizing the need for specialized security measures for industrial systems. We touched on cloud before, cloud risks. So with the rise of cloud, organizations are faced with increased security risk, highlighting the need for robust cloud security strategies. Supply chain attacks, supply chain vulnerabilities pose a significant risk, requiring enhanced scrutiny and security for third-party software. The last part is insider risk. Insider threats are growing, making it crucial to implement effective insider threat detection and mitigation strategies. To present the remaining of the slides, I'll hand over to Polly. Before Polly goes on, I'll touch on this last slide. How do organizations protect against malware? They use a sandbox. Sandbox have been there for 10 years, and this is their third evolution. They help us discover and analyze malicious and unknown threats, including zero-day tests. They provide a verdict on executing a file in an isolated environment, and they give you a remediation on whether it's safe or not. They provide protection at different points at your network, whether it's your network, endpoint, email, cloud, or web across IT and OT environment. I'll hand over to Daniel to present the remainder of the slides. Daniel?
Okay, look, thank you so much, Vinny, for the awesome intro, and as well as taking us through sort of like what's going on in the world, I guess. Very quickly, a bit about myself. So Dan Polidori, you heard Vinny call me Dan, Polly. I go by many different names, but Polly is just my last name abbreviated. That's all it is. So just wanted to explain that, just in case you're wondering who is this guy Vinny's talking about. So look, I wanted to take a little bit of a different sort of spin, I think, on what I was going to present today. I didn't really want to just jump in and start presenting a whole bunch of sales slides because, not that I think it's boring, but I just feel like I want to try to explain the why. Like why do you need a sandbox? So I thought we'd start off by looking at the kill chain. So most of you that work in, I guess, the cybersecurity industry, you would be very well aware of what the kill chain is, but it's effectively it's a term that's used to describe the phases of a cyber attack. And that basically starts from the left-hand side being reconnaissance. It goes all the way over to the right-hand side, which is, where they get to the end, which is your data exfil or exfiltration. The aim of the kill chain is you want to try to disrupt the attack as early in the kill chain as possible, right? So that's if you're disrupting it at the delivery point, or potentially even the reconnaissance point, which is quite difficult because we'll touch on reconnaissance shortly. You've got a much better chance of getting through the attack unscathed without losing any data or anything like that. So if you can just flick to the next slide for me, Vinny, or whoever's running the slides. Sorry. Yep. All right, so very quickly touch on reconnaissance. I'm not going to cover all of them just because of time, but I did want to touch on the reconnaissance phase because it's actually it's a very important phase. Very hard to protect yourself, when it comes to reconnaissance because, as you can see there, a lot of the information gathering, if you become, say, a targeted organization, is actually done um, with information that's effectively available, from public resources. So as you can see, they're like non-technical information, things like social media sites, Facebook, LinkedIn, dumpster diving, recycled electronics. There's so much information available for organizations, not only on the web, but sort of like everywhere else as well. Um, you know, when you think about non-technical information, very quick example, someone targets an organization, they jump on LinkedIn, they find people that work there, they then find those people on Facebook, they find out if those people, if people are friends, they find out what groups that they're into. If both those people have dogs, they're part of a dog walking group, all of a sudden they have a way of, starting to weaponize an attack, craft an email that might look like it's from the dog walking group or something along those lines, right? So again, very easy to find information about companies online. When you start looking at, say, the technical aspect, who is ARIN, that's the American one. So for us, that would be APNIC, right? Public IP address information, start doing port scans. Again, a lot of information that's actually available. I was talking about passive reconnaissance there, so that's where you're not really sort of engaging with the organization or individuals from that organization. But then we start looking at, say, active reconnaissance as well, and that's when they start to actually engage with the target's network, or the individuals themselves. So, as I said, very difficult to protect yourself if you have been targeted and people are actually just doing reconnaissance to try to understand what they might be able to potentially exploit. We'll jump to the next slide, Vinu. So the next one would have been weaponization. We're going to skip that and we're just going to go straight to delivery. So reconnaissance is what gives them the ability to target their attack and understand who they're going to target and how they're going to get what sort of malware they need to craft to actually get it into the organization. When it comes to the delivery phase, this is where we can start actually trying to do something about uh, protecting ourselves, from the attack that's going to happen. As you can see, there's multiple delivery methods there. You've got phishing emails. That's the one I kind of just spoke about, right? With the two employees, part of the dog group, someone crafts an email, make it look like it's from the dog group. It's got a link in there, might even have an attachment. And, obviously they're just sort of counting on, one or two or three of those people to download that attachment or, click on the link and then, effectively off they go. Phishing emails is still the highest attack vector, right? Email by far. Drive-by downloads, basically tricking somebody into downloading something, that is malicious. So, fairly simple one. And, generally that can be done again from an email. It could even be a link in an email that forces them to go to a website that they think is legitimate, and then they go and pull down, some executable or, it could be anything really, a PDF, right, or a Word document with a macro in it. Web application attacks as well, probably not as common, but still, it's still common enough that it's worthwhile talking about. Generally, you can with web application attacks, they can be used to bypass security measures as well, and trying to gain unauthorized access into servers and databases, right? So they're generally from the outside in. USB drop attacks, really common one. Again, attackers crafting malware, putting them on USB keys, identifying employees and potentially dropping those USB key like next to their car where they have lunch and stuff like that. And obviously that person's going to pick it up, and 9 times out of 10, they're going to go, I wonder what's on here, plug it in without sort of thinking about what they're doing. And again, through that reconnaissance phase, making use of default weak or compromised credentials, right? You'd be surprised how many people forget to change the local admin password on a device or something along those lines. And as Venu said as well, with the amount of IoT devices that are now being connected to our networks, these devices are not built with security in mind. So it's becoming very difficult to sort of like protect our environments. We'll jump to the next slide if we can. So next would have been exploitation, but we're going to skip that one. Obviously, that's at the point where they've delivered their malware, and now they're going to go ahead and they're going to exploit that malware, right? Or effectively start the attack. So potentially drop drop some rats in the environment to start making some reverse connections back out of the network and all that sort of stuff. I'm only covering the parts of the kill chain that I'm sort of going to talk about today from a sandbox perspective. So command and control. So obviously malware's been crafted, it's been delivered, they've started their attack, right? So they're starting to do their exploitation, they're exploiting. And now it's really around your command and control phase. So here is now where they're dropping, say, rats into an environment for a remote access Trojan. And that's obviously going to make callbacks to a command and control station, giving the attacker persistent access, into the environment. And unfortunately, even with firewalls, and believe me, firewalls, they do help. They're a massive deterrent with your SSL encryption, decryption that they can do these days. Having firewall policies and all that sort of stuff. But unfortunately, attackers, they tunnel themselves through well-known and used protocols like HTTP or HTTPS or even DNS, right? So it becomes very difficult to just detect, I guess, traffic within the environment just based on, having a firewall policy in place, right? It doesn't always, it's not always that easy, unfortunately. And one other thing that I'll mention as well is in attacks like these, we're seeing dwell times now of, I think it was like the last I looked, it was 70 plus days. In fact, I think it was actually longer than that. Could even be 200. I don't remember the exact number, but imagine having an attacker that's actually compromised your network. They're sitting in there and they've been in there for say 70 days or 200 days. And within that time, they're exfiltrating data, or they're just moving and spreading laterally, which I'll touch on next, to sort of further infect your system, right? So we'll go to the next slide if we can, which is lateral movement. So again, command and control, they've set themselves in the network, right? They're sitting, say, within a subnet or a particular subnet. And now this is the point where they want to start to try to move laterally in the network, right? They may have credentials, but the credentials that they have might not give them the access that they want. So the hope here is that they start moving laterally, so east-west. They start trying to jump outside of the subnet that they're in, and they start trying to find servers or potentially even Windows machines that have at some point been logged onto with, say, a domain admin account. Now, if once an attacker gets a domain admin account, that's effectively going to give them the keys to the kingdom, right, so to speak. So, again, this is that lateral movement and trying to sort of stop that from actually happening. This is where things like firewall policies and segregation does come into play. It does help, but we're all human. People make mistakes. Sometimes holes are opened up in a firewall policy by accident or without even thinking, and that's going to allow them to potentially jump out of that subnet and start moving around and mapping out the entire network. The other issue around lateral movement is the tools that are used. As you can see there, they're legitimate tools. PSExec, WMI, PowerShell. I mean, they're just three quick tools that are, they're generally around and installed on a machine, especially PowerShell and WMI, and they are used for legitimate reasons. But unfortunately, attackers can then go and use those tools as well, for not legitimate purposes. And if we go to the next one, data exfiltration. So this is at the point where attack has been done, they've got their data, they're transferring data to like an internal staging server, and they're slowly moving that data out of the network, and you've effectively been compromised. Okay, so this is what we want to try to avoid. All right, so that's a little bit around the kill chain and I guess I hope that kind of helps sort of really sort of push the why. And this is where a sandbox is going to really assist with some of those points in that kill chain. So we'll go to the next slide. Yep. So cool. So very quickly, just touching on, I think, that security framework and still staying on the kill chain. As you can see, the kill chain is still there. And we talk about sort of organizations and how most organizations, they have adopted like a security framework. And, the kill chain is one of those. And security operations teams really need to try as hard as they can to secure all of the different types of threat vectors or entry points that are in the network, right? So they could be mail, web, endpoint. There's a lot of different endpoints, attack vectors that malware could come in from, and they need to try to do that first, and then you want to sort of try and adopt, say, like a sandboxing methodology, right? And then actually introduce that into the network. Because once you protect those attack vectors, then you want to start looking for unknowns, and that's really what a sandbox is there to do. The sandbox is really there to try to help you find 0 days within your environment. And this is obviously where Vinu mentioned Sandbox has been around for quite a while. We're in the third evolution of sandboxing, and this is where now sandboxes are starting to employ AI and machine learning to sort of try to keep up with the ever, the constant changes that malware is going through and how malware is also evolving as well. So we'll go to the next slide. So I'm trying to speed it up a bit just because I'm just conscious of time. So first generation of sandboxes, just so you know, I guess from the maturity of the product very quickly, first generation was very static and also very siloed. Did not scale very well at all, and also was very expensive. Your second generation of sandboxes was more of a platform approach, and they definitely started moving in the right direction. But again, things kind of stalled a little bit, and it sort of started becoming very static, if you will, and having to work in conjunction with other, other technologies, right? So, relying on other inline security controls and stuff like that. We're now sort of in that third generation of sandboxes where you can see things like an evolved detection engine, more broader coverage, and also trying to actually work with the SOC processes or with SOCs as well. The other thing that third generation brings is the OT component. So through COVID, we actually saw the IT and the OT networks really starting to converge quite heavily. And that was because obviously with the lockdowns that we had, OT environments, they still needed to be maintained. And the only way to really do that was either grab a 4G modem or a 4G dongle and just plug it into the OT environment so that contractors could still access it. Or the alternative was to just bridge the IT and the OT environments. Right, and as good as that is, it's also very scary because there's no protection in place for that. So we'll go to the next slide. So again, third generation, really coming back to the why, and really that's around your advanced ransomware and 0-day threats, right? As I mentioned before, once organizations have established a good baseline in securing all of their threat vectors and all of their entry points, right? So therefore, it becomes very difficult for, say, known threats to actually get into the environment. You need to start thinking about, well, what about the unknowns? There's so many 0 days that would be out there that we don't even know about that, attackers and nation state actors have found that they've basically got in their back pocket because they know that once they use them once, it's very likely that it will no longer be obviously a 0 day. They won't be able to use it or exploit it again. Right, so we want to try to protect against those. And if we could just, sorry, do you want to just build up that slide? Just press it twice. It'll just be easier. So then we go to obviously that lateral spread that I was talking about before. Lateral spread is really, like a good example is like a sophisticated ransomware that has the ability to self-propagate throughout the network. Now, a really perfect example of that one, and everyone's going to know it, is WannaCry. I don't know if anyone remembers when WannaCry actually first came on the scene, but it became very famous because it was effectively just exploiting a Microsoft SMB vulnerability. And it really did, if you remember, cripple a large number of businesses, right? And then from WannaCry, we've had spin-offs, right? So we've had DearCry ransomware, which leveraged an exploit in Microsoft Exchange as well. Okay, so again, these are things that exist in our systems that unfortunately they're unknown. So how do you detect those? And then obviously you got that manual and slow response at the end there, right? So we want to try to reduce the impact and reduce the dwell time as much as possible. We don't want someone sitting in our network for 70 days or 200 days. We want to find them as quickly as possible, obviously, right? Because the less time they have in our network, the less time they have to actually cause us any problems or issues. Go to the next one. So then we sort of say, how do we address a zero-day threat? And it's actually quite simple with sandboxing. You effectively just have that little box at the bottom there. You've got known good, probably good. So they're fine. That's not a problem. That's based off reputation, as you can see there, file IP, app signatures, and the rest. Obviously, on the right-hand side, you've got known bad. So that's completely blacklisted or very suspicious, right? And again, based on IPS signatures, email, and stuff like that. If whatever the file is or URL is falls in the middle, well, then you want to sandbox that file or that URL, right? You basically, you want to actually have that processed by something else to understand what it's going to do in your environment. And as you can see at the top there, some of the integrations that we do have, firewall, mail, our WAF, and endpoint protection as well, right? So endpoint. And we'll just go to the next slide. How am I going for time? Am I okay? Yeah, I think we'll be
A
okay.
little tight, but we'll be okay.
Yep. Okay, cool. Yeah, so, on that, we talk about those 0 days, and then that's where we sort of start talking about trying to block those advanced threats. And then this is really where now we start looking at the integrations that we do actually have, right? So, what makes, I think, our sandbox very unique is it has the ability to analyze both IT and OT targeted malware. And that's going to happen in a safe and virtual environment. It's not something that you have to worry about trying to set up or configure. Our sandbox is based on a modified hypervisor. And we also cover, Windows, Mac OS, Android, as I said, they're OT. So there's actually a Linux OT machine that will get deployed and can understand OT protocols like Modbus, SCADA, and all the rest, right? We also do have machine learning built in. So like I said before, that whole third generation piece, we've got machine learning and deep learning built into the engines. And there's a few different engines that actually exist inside the FortiSandbox as well. I'm just sort of trying to cut this slide a bit short because I want to try to make sure I get to the demos. But what I will say is that the additional engines that we've included, they improve the detection efficiency around about the sort of 20% mark. That's what we've seen anyway from our own internal testing. And really for us, I think the secret sauce is our Fabric platform that we have. Looking in that little square on the right-hand side at the bottom there shows the amount of native integrations that we actually have. And like, Vinu spoke before about vendor consolidation. And I'm not going to stand here and say that one day, every company is going to have everything Fortinet, because I know that that's not going to happen. But, where it makes sense, I do think that having something like FortiGate, FortiMail, and a FortiSandbox, because those native integrations that you get within that Fabric platform they're second to none. Like yes, you can do that with Python scripts and a SAW or a Seam and stuff like that. But again, you got to hire people to do that, and it becomes very complex. All right, we'll go to the next slide there. So now very quickly, I spoke about that kill chain before. I've kind of gone through Sandbox a little bit, why the whole third generation part. And I just wanted to circle back and touch on the three parts of the kill chain that I spoke about, where we can actually, just a couple of use cases where we can actually make a difference within the kill chain. And I'll start off with delivery. So we'll go to the next slide very quickly. The first one is really, where we sort of talk about breaking the kill chain in that delivery stage. And you'll see a demo of this as well with email URL links. Okay, so as you can see, I'm not going to read everything on the screen, but very quickly, you have an email that comes into FortiMail. FortiMail will basically send that URL to FortiSandbox. FortiSandbox will spin up a VM. It'll try and access that URL, and it will then make a decision on whether or not that URL is malicious or not, and decide on whether or not to allow the user to access that URL or not. So that's already right, trying to break the kill chain at that delivery phase. And that's going to help you with those phishing emails that could potentially be very targeted attacks. We can also do it with email attachments as well, and it works in exactly the same way. We'll go to the next one, Vinu. Thank you. So web browsing, obviously, again, a very problematic one, because you've got users that are browsing the web all the time. And as much as we want to believe that they're just using our work computers for, work purposes, we all know that obviously they're going to go and browse whatever they want. So here, again, clients browsing, they're going to hit the FortiGate, and they're going to go through an AV profile or FortiProxy. It's going to get sent to FortiSandbox if there's an attachment or any malicious scripts or anything that tries to run. And we're going to be able to detect that as well, and stop whatever's being tried to delivered very early in the kill chain as well. All right, we'll jump to the next one. Again, still in that delivery method, I spoke about the USB drops before, right? So Forti client integrated with FortiSandbox, and I'm only showing you one I guess, use case or integration with FortiClient, but there's actually several ways that FortiClient can actually integrate with Sandbox to assist you in that kill chain. This is just one quick example where user plugs a USB key into their endpoint. FortiClient will basically send any files that are on that USB key to FortiSandbox for detonation, within a secure VM, to ensure that there's nothing malicious on them as well. Okay, so again, very easy integration to set up. We'll go to the next one. Lateral movement. So I spoke about that quite heavily before as well. I mean, this is generally where the attackers come in and now they want to start to branch out. They're mapping your network and they want to start moving around your environment to see where else they can get to. Very similar way, right? FortiClient with FortiSandbox, we can obviously detect if hosts are trying to exploit or drop malware or anything like that. And then we can send that to Sandbox for, again, detonation, and then a response back saying either yes or no, that's fine, or it's not fine. We also do have the ability to do have FortiGate sitting there as internal firewalls as well, and then actually doing firewall policies between segments, right? So then you can actually, if you have someone trying to move laterally through two different VLANs, obviously we can then inspect that traffic and then send it to Sandbox if required as well. And we'll go to the next one. And I thought I'd finish with this one because I found this one, I thought this was a really interesting one. FortiDeceptor is another one of our products, and it's exactly as the name suggests, right? It's a deception technology. The benefit of having, say, a FortiDeceptor in your network is that it will deploy decoys, and there's a whole number of decoys that you can actually deploy now. One of those as well is an OT decoy, so you can deploy a PLC decoy, SCADA decoy. from an OT perspective and from an IT perspective. I mean, it's there's quite a lot there. Web servers, RDP servers, right? File servers. The benefit that we have there is the decoy is there to obviously try to attract whoever's dropped into your network. And the benefit there is once they hit that, you can then send them whatever files they try to drop. Deceptor also integrates with FortiSandbox as well. So, I won't go into the detail there because it's very similar to the other one, but as you can see, not only are you then decepting them with the deception technology, but you still have the ability to sandbox whatever they're trying to do and then come back with a verdict as well. Right, and very quickly, lastly, modes of operation. I've spoken very heavily about the fabric, the platform, but we do also have third-party, other ways of integrating with other systems. And as you can see there, we can do MTA and BCC for mail. We can do ICAP as well, so we can receive ICAP from WAF and web gateways. Sniffer port, we can do that as well. The only thing is with the sniffer port, you have to make sure the traffic is decrypted once it hits the sandbox, otherwise we can't inspect it. And we can also do on-demand and network shares as well. So constantly scanning a network share or on-demand submissions via API or via the GUI. Okay, so it's not all about the fabric. We can, sort of branch out and integrate with other types of products or vendors that are out there. All right, we're coming up on, so we've got 20 minutes left. I'm thinking I might skip. Do you want to skip this one here, Vinu? Because it'll probably take up a bit of time. And if there's time at the end, I'll go over it. But we'll just skip to the next one. Yep. Go to the next one, Vinu, if you can. Yep. Cool. So when we talk about, I guess, sort of advanced threat detection, I spoke before, about machine learning, deep learning and all that sort of stuff. So a couple of things just to sort of throw out there, static and dynamic analysis, and some of that is based on our random forest engine plus random forest plus boost tree, and then least squares optimization. Now, I don't know who comes up with these names. They're very interesting, but these are effectively just engines that are running, within the FortiSandbox to complement the engines that are already in there. So this, in there you've got the static scan engine. We've got our CPRL, which is our AV, patented AV database. So there's a whole bunch of stuff that's actually going on within Sandbox. We also do code emulation as well. So that's part of that, the recursive neural networks, or RNN. And that's really around when we do a dynamic scan and we actually do execute a piece of malware in a VM. We've got a code emulator that's running in there so that I can actually see what's happening, right? If scripts are being run and what have you not. And as far as the technology goes, Sandbox is a very mature technology. It's been around for quite some time. Sandboxing was born, our Sandbox was born out of FortiGuard Labs, or from FortiGuard Labs. And as you can see, it's got some third-party from NSS Labs and then ICSA Labs as well, right? So I know NSS Labs is no longer around from a COVID perspective, but the cyberratings.org did actually take on all of the testing that was done by NSS Labs. So that is still legitimate tests, and the recommendations are still legit and firm as well. All right, we'll go to the next one. So very quickly around coverage-wise. So we do have a very broad coverage. We have physical appliances, they're virtual machines. We have a hosted solution, and we also have a cloud solution as well. So from a form factor perspective, there's, as I said, there's on-prem, PaaS, SaaS. You can even do virtual machines, and then we can even host the Windows machines for you as well, right, in the cloud. Devices, Windows, Mac, Android, Linux, and industrial controls. And the system itself is also a homogeneous system. And I think this is where you get a lot of the smarts from Sandbox, because as you can see, the sandboxes will share information with each other in your environment, right? And they'll also send any 0 days that it finds back to FortiGuard Labs, and then it'll basically spit that back out to all of the sandboxes that are around. All right, so it really is around that holistic protection. And next slide. And here is really where we sort of come back and talk about um, working with the SOC, right? And trying to bolster the SOC. We don't want to replace the SOC, right? We need a SOC. We know that. But what we want to do is we want to help them. We want to complement the SOC. We want to help them scale. And it's very difficult, as Venu mentioned before, to scale these days with bums on seats because it's hard with the skill shortages that are out there to find people that can actually work through the amount of data that's coming through. You need to start employing some sort of AI or machine learning, something that's going to help you, right? And that way, the people that you have, they're only looking at what they really need to, what needs to be validated. So again, the automation perspective, you can see over here, all those products are there, they're ours, but API connectors are there, so we can work with third parties. MITRE support is also part of the system as well. You'll see that in the demos that we're about to run. And the tools that are available with inside. I don't really touch on those, but you do have interactive mode. So when the VMs are actually running malware, you can run them in interactive mode. You can do video and packet captures as well, so that when malware's run with inside a VM, it can take a video and you can actually download that to see what was occurring, or the on-demand submission, which I do show in the demo. Yeah. All right. I think that's it. Really the benefits. Look, for me, the two main ones is the protection against your zero-day threats, right? I can't stress that one enough. They do exist, and they're definitely out there. 400 million analyzed files as well. So that's actually going up all the time. And that's, Sandbox's, evaluating the amount of files or seeing what it sees. So those would be the two biggest things for me. I think, the fact that it's the pedigree that's not only driving FortiSandbox, but also where FortiSandbox was born from, right? And that's out of FortiGuard Labs, which was where all this intelligence comes from. So demo 1 will be based on the real-time anti-phishing engine that exists in FortiSandbox. So let's jump into the demo. So you can see I'm logged into my Windows client, and I'm in my the mail app Thunderbird, and you can see I don't have any emails in there at the moment. What we're going to do is just generate a couple of emails very quickly. So to do that, we just need to run a couple of commands. Just bear with me while I grab those. So we'll paste that one in. We're going to basically just generate a clean email. And then we're going to generate an email with a URL in it as well, malicious URL. All right. If we jump back across now, we should see some emails come through. Give it a second. All right. As you can see, we've got our two emails that have come through. The first one is basically just a test email, nothing really in there. The one that we want to look at is the second one here, where we can see that it has a URL in there to basically asking us to click on the link and change our password. So I would say a very poor attempt at a phishing email, but obviously if it was a targeted attack, it would be a lot more tailored to either the organization or the individual. We're going to go ahead and we're going to click on this link. Now, as you can see, we're currently being evaluated. That's interesting. Sorry about that, just had to refresh, and that's got that going. So you can see the link is currently being evaluated by the sandbox. And if we just give that a few seconds, we should we'll jump back over to sandbox now. And let's go and have a look at the scan job VM jobs. And as you can see, we've actually got a VM running at the moment that's currently evaluating that link. So we'll just let that finish and we'll come straight back. Okay, so as we can see, that job has finished. If we go and have a look at the URL job search now, we can actually see that that scan has just finished running. If we jump back across to the host, we can actually see that we are being blocked, because FortiSandbox has deemed that URL malicious. So we're obviously not allowed to access that, that site. If we go back to FortiSandbox and we look at the actual URL job search entry here, you can see that it has been marked as medium risk. We know that it's the right scan. Look at the timestamp 1042. Look at the timestamp of the host 1043. And then we can dive into this a little bit as well. We can start having a look. We can see that it was rated by the real-time zero-day anti-phishing service or engine. Gives us the start time, end time, who the email receiver was, how it was rated down here. So we know it was phishing, and it was launched on a Windows Cloud VM as well. You can also download the images from here if you want to, so you can actually see what was happening inside the VM. We're going to have a quick look at the tree view so we can actually see what was happening inside the VM once that link was actually hit. So you can see there was quite a few things occurring. We can click on these, have a look at the processes that were running or files that were being dropped at that point in time as well. I don't know which one I just clicked on there, sorry, but if we looked at another one over here, again, we can see memory operations, so something was happening, and also some registry stuff as well. That's the benefit of having it run with inside in a VM. And also we can jump in here, look at the MITRE attack, different TTPs that may have been used, and also what was happening. A whole bunch of different file operations were occurring. Naturally some of this might just be legitimate OS, but then obviously some of it might not be. All right, so that is the real-time anti-phishing demo. Thank you so much. So for the second demo, we're going to do an inline block, and then I'm also going to do a forced VM scan after the inline block has actually occurred. Just showing that if you're not happy with the decision made, we can actually go ahead and force a scan to run. So let's jump straight into it, because time is always short in these webinars. So what we're going to do, we are logged back into our Windows client, and we're going to open up our browser. We'll open up a new tab, and then we're just going to go and grab this link from this file, and we're going to access this link and download this file. So just give that 1 second. All right, so as you can see, we're getting a high security alert, and basically this is FortiSandbox stating that the file is malicious and that it can't be downloaded. So what we'll do is we'll jump across to the FortiSandbox to actually have a look what actually happened with that file. So we're going to go straight over to the scan job and have a look at the file job search, because it was a file that we tried to download. And you'll notice here at the very top we've got a file, windows.exe, so that's the one we tried to download, timestamp of 10:01. If we go back over, you'll notice the timestamp 10:03, so pretty much the same, so we know that's the right entry. From here we can jump in, have a little bit of a look at what actually occurred. So you can see that it was the static scan engine that actually detected that file. Not much else to look at when it's the static scan engine, because it's basically seeing the hash and it knows that that file is bad. Tree view, you'll just see the file effectively, and that's basically it. And we can go and have a look at the details, but it's all fairly boring because it's basically just it knows that it's malicious just off the hash of the file. So what we can do here is we can actually force this job or force that file to actually run inside a VM. So that's what we're going to do here. You can see I'm ticking the box to force to scan the file inside a VM. We'll go OK. And what we'll now see, if we go to the VM jobs, we will see, if you just give that a second. And as you can see there, we have the VM that has now spun up, and the file is now being executed within the VM. So what we'll do is, instead of, I'll just, it shouldn't take too long, but we'll come back to in a second once that's done. Alright, so as we can see now, the VM job has finished, it's disappeared from this view. If we now go back down to the file job search, we can now see we have another entry, a second entry, all very much the same, but the difference being this time, if we actually go into the entry, you'll notice this time this has now been rated by the dynamic scan engine, right? Cloud, because the VM that it was running on is hosted in the cloud. And we can already see quite a lot of differences. The number of indicators down the bottom here, as you can see, there's a lot more happening. It wasn't just the file hash itself. If we jump down here, we can see the scan start time, the end time, so how long it actually took to run the scan. We'll jump over to the tree view. You can see here it looks a little bit different as well, so we don't just see a file executing this time around, we see a little bit more. So if we actually click on this, we can then jump down the bottom here, have a look at process information, file operation, what was actually happening. So you can see that there was a file that looks like that was dropped. Looks like it was called drop.com as well. So, you know, you can basically have a look and see what was actually occurring at that point in time. And if we go to the details tab, obviously here we're going to see a lot more as well. So if you remember before the MITRE attack, the TTPs that were being triggered, there was only one, whereas now we're seeing things like a remote file copy, some user execution, and a few other things as well. We can also drop down the bottom here, look at the network operations. You can see here things like it was trying to reach out to public IP addresses, or, you know, this URL as well. You've also got your chronology chart. So if we hover over the top of these red dots, you can see that, you know, at this point in time, there was a file that was spawned, and you can see the file name there as well. And it was a command line that actually ran that. A couple of other ones as well. You can also download screenshots from within inside the VM, packet captures, so you can open them up in Wireshark and actually see what was going on. And you can also download the files as well from the bottom here under the file operations if you wanted to. You can pull down the files so you can investigate them further. Now that is the inline scan demo. And yeah, thank you so much for your time on that one. We'll jump over to the third demo shortly. Now for the third and final demo today, I just wanted to show an on-demand file scan. So that's where you can actually upload files directly to FortiSandbox and have them run in a VM, right, to determine if they're malicious or not. So that's a very quick one. I've actually already got a file that I've downloaded on the box. So what we'll do is the first thing actually we need to do is we do need to turn off the AV, otherwise it's going to get detected. So we'll come in here and we'll just go and turn off that AV profile. Apply that. Jump back to this Windows client. We're just going to go straight to the scan job, and as you can see here, we've got our file on demand. So just give that a second to load. So you can see that I've already, you know, I do have some sitting in the list, but we're going to do a fresh one. So we're going to go submit file, and we're going to upload, and we're just going to grab this zip file right here. Now that's, and obviously we'll give it the password. And we're also going to force the scan inside a VM as well. So we're going to force those files to actually run in a VM. And yep, that'll do. So we'll go submit. And as you can see, file was submitted successfully. Now, if we go over to our VM jobs, you're going to see a few VMs that have been spun up, because inside that file there was actually multiple oh, sorry, no, I think that might have been the other one actually. That's fine, all good. Either way, oh no, there they are. Yep, there was multiple files, just took a while. So what we'll do is we'll just let these run, and we'll come back to that as soon as it's done. There's not much more that we can see there because we really need those jobs to actually finish. Okay, so we can now see some of those starting to actually come to completion. So you can see three of those have hit 100% with the other two sort of trailing behind. What we can do now is if we drop back down to the on-demand, the file on-demand scanning, if we just bear with that for a sec while that opens. So you can see here that this is still in process, right? So there's a whole bunch of files that are inside there. I only have 5 VMs that can spin up at any one time within FortiSandbox. So it will take like a little bit to complete that. Again, if we go back to that VM jobs list, you'll notice how another one basically spawned up straight away, and that's because it's basically scanning the other files. So that's why that one there looked like it restarted, but it was actually another file being scanned. In any case, if we jump into the file job search, we can have a very quick look at these files that were scanned. So you can see here at the top, what I might actually do is, it'll just be a little bit quicker. I'm going to just drop back out of the Windows client, that VM, and I'll go back to just looking at Sandbox on my machine. It's a little bit faster. So I'll refresh that, and you can see here, these are all of the, what do you call it, the entries for the files that were scanned. Sorry, bit of a moment there. Now, obviously, you can see here this says clean, and that's because that was password protected, right? Let's not forget that. So that's why that was not able to actually be scanned when the file was uploaded, if that makes sense. But obviously, once we're actually able to actually jump into that file, we start seeing that everything that's in there seems to be rather malicious. Now, a lot of this is actually going to be detected if we open up some of these entries. Now, I'm just mindful of time at the moment. I don't have much. I think I've already gone over, but let's have a quick look at a couple. But, looking here, you can see this was rated by the AV scan engine. What else is there? You can see it was a forced VM scan. That's because it was a manual file upload. Tree view. So again, looking at all of the different types of system process that were run. Again, remember you can click on these to see what was actually happening at that point in time. So, looking at these ones, whatever was going on. Right, so that doesn't look great. Generally WMI server, so shadow copy. Generally, when something's trying to access the shadow copy servers, it's trying to delete any backups or anything like that. So that can pretty much be taken as malicious. What else was there? Looks like there was a file dump as well. So a whole bunch of things that were occurring. ps1.amc. So it looks like there was a PowerShell script that was dumped. So, and if we look at the detail of this one, again, you can sort of really sort of deep dive into, from the MITRE attack, the TTPs, anything like that, any network operation connections like before, download your logs, your screenshots as well, if you did want to see what was happening, within the VM when this attack was taking place. And again, as well, looking at your chronology chart so you can see what was actually happening at what time as well within the attack. So, I mean, they're all going to be fairly similar, so I won't bother going through all of them. The one thing I will mention as well is the on-demand file and on-demand URL can also be accessed via REST API as well. So you can actually have something else that's going to, basically submit files to FortiSandbox using the API. To be checked, right? So to see if they're malicious or not. All right, so that concludes the third demo. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone. Apologies, we just went a little bit over, but look, what an insightful session. Thank you, Daniel. Like a very knowledgeable session, a lot of interesting content. If you do any questions, please send them across to us. But if there's any, we will welcome to take questions after the session as well. So feel free to reach out to us. You can email them across to presales@wavelink.com.au. Or your Fortinet or Wavelink person that you usually deal with, and they can get across to us and come back to you. Thank you so much for your time, and do apologize. We did have some technical difficulties joining the session, presenting the content, but we've gone through the end, so that's all that matters. Yeah, like I said previously, do reach out to us if you have any questions. Thank you all.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Vinu. Bye. And Kieran. Thanks, Kieran. See ya.